Pen. 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 Good evening, ZESN Chairperson, Mr. Andrew Makoni, and good evening to Mr. Manda, Election Resource Center Chairperson, ZESN Programs Director, Ellen Dingani, and Election Resource Director, Mrs. Barbara Bebe. And good evening, members of the press. Our sincere apologies for starting late. We're scheduled to start the press conference in the afternoon, but our sincere apologies. This press conference is going to unpack the observation findings of the March 26 by-election 2022. So it's a preliminary unpacking of the observations, where we can safely say it's a preliminary statement that will be unpacked to the fourth wing of the state. I thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to reiterate also our apology from ERC as well as from ZESN for holding you too long here. The reasons were also beyond our control. We have been receiving results as we're coming in, and our analysis of this report or analysis of events was also work in progress, in the sense of we were working on it as we were receiving the results. The result has been that you were prejudiced, but we are sorry about that, and thank you for your patience very much. Okay, I'm sure that you are aware of who ERC and ZESN are. What we have done is to do an analysis of things on the ground. So this is a preliminary statement on the process of the 26th of March by elections. As you did here with me is Andrew Makoni, the chairperson of ZESN, and of course the director of ERC, as well as Ellen Dingani, also of ZESN. I will just give you a portion of our report, and Mr. Makoni will also take it from there, after which then, of course, we'll be in the firing line from you. Yesterday, the 26th of March, 2022, Zimbabweans across 28 constituencies and 122 local authorities went to the polls to cast their votes for the long-delayed parliamentary and local authority by-elections due to the indefinite suspension of the elections, by-elections, which was occasioned by statutory instrument 225A of 2020, which was actually cited as Public Health COVID-19 Prevention, Containment and Treatment Amendment Regulations 2020 number 4. Ordinarily, in line with Section 158, subsection 3 of the Constitution and Sections 39 and 121 of the Electoral Act, by-elections to fill in vacancies are held within 90 days of the vacancy having arisen. For these by-elections, the Election Resource Center and Zimbabwe Election Support Network deployed more than 400 trained and accredited election day observers, including deployment 206 observers to 6 priority constituencies. That's Binga North, Chivi South, Epworth, Kwekwe, Central, Mrewa South, and Mtasa South, where sample-based observations were conducted using a statistically representative sample of polling stations. Given the timing, it was not possible to conduct SBOs for all 28 by-elections. These 6 constituencies were selected to provide a geographic spread and to reflect the political diversity of the country. So this statement on the conduct of the elections is based on ERC and ZESN's direct observation of the process of voting, counting and posting of results for these mentioned 6 constituencies, and follows ERC and ZESN's situational statement on the opening and setup of polling stations released 25 March 2022. We've also looked at the political environment during the pre-election period, and it was marred by political violence, resulting in the loss, unfortunate loss of life of a CCC supporter in Bizo, Kwekwe district, and the election-related intimidation. ERC and ZESN unreservedly condemn any form of violence and attempt to limit electoral competition through the restriction of campaign activities. Political rights are protected in Section 67 of the Constitution, and all stakeholders are enjoined to always promote the Constitution. The ERC and ZESN noted activities that qualify as vote buying during the campaign period, which included the use of food to sway voters. Voter information and education associated with the voter registration process has not been comprehensive enough ahead of the by-elections. This shortcoming in public engagement, which when viewed alongside the administrative of the two different voters' roles in constituencies where there are concurrent elections for the National Assembly and ward by-elections, has resulted in confusion amongst voters in the affected areas. Stakeholders have also expressed concern over the quality and integrity of the voters' roll, which was further compounded by the delay by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commissions in sharing the official voters' roll for analysis. Overall, ERC and ZESN observers reported that the election day was peaceful generally and generally well administered, but with concerns about community cohesion in rural areas undermining the right to vote. Of the 6 constituencies observed so far, results have been announced for Epworth, Murewa South and Mtasa South. The results for Epworth and Murewa South reflect the ballots cast. However, it is not possible to verify the results from Mtasa South's community cohesion, and a close election undermine the credibility of the election and the legitimacy of the outcome. ERC and ZESN will verify the results for Pinga North, Chibi South and Pepe Central when they have been announced. ERC and ZESN are still processing the data received from its additional stationary and mobile observers, and will provide the findings from all the complementary observation methodologies in a forthcoming comprehensive report. So, voting and counting and results anonymous processes, only voters under maybe the heading of voter verification, only voters with their names appearing on the voters' roll and who had appropriate identity documents were permitted to vote. ERC and ZESN observers reported that at 100% of polling stations, voters had their names checked against the polling station-based voters' rolls and identification verified and identification verified before being permitted to vote. On indelible ink, ERC and ZESN also observed that all voters had their fingers marked with ink before being issued with ballot papers. However, in their situational statement, ZESN and ERC observers reported concerns over the quality of indelible ink being used by ZEC. Observers found that at 100% of polling stations, voters' fingers were checked for indelible ink before being permitted to vote, and there were no incidents of attempts to vote twice or thrice or to vote again. On the question of voters being turned away, observers reported that there were numerous instances where 25 or more persons were turned away and not allowed to vote at some polling stations. Reasons being presenting wrong identity documents and showing up at the wrong polling stations. Out of the 6 constituencies where ZESN and ERC conducted SBO, high numbers of voters turned away were recorded. 29% of observers in Binga, North Constituency, Matabele North, 25% of voters, of observers in Epworth Constituency, Harare, Metropolitan Province, and 26% of observers in Kwekwe Central Constituency reported seeing many voters being turned away. On the issue of assisted voters, ERC and ZESN observers noted instances of high numbers of people being assisted to vote. In the 6 constituencies observed under the SBO, the constituencies where observers reported instances of many individuals requesting assistance in casting their ballots included Epworth, 59%, Chibi South, 36%, and Binga North, 59%. Then on closing and counting, all observers were permitted to observe closing of polls and counting of the ballots at all polling stations where they were deployed. ERC and ZESN observers noted some isolated incidents in which individuals without authorization to enter polling stations did so. Further observers reported that before counting all ballot seals, all ballot seals were confirmed to be untampered with before counting commenced. On the party agents aspect, political parties are key stakeholders in the electoral processes, and their presence at polling stations increases trust and accountability in the election. During the counting processes, observers reported 100% of Triple C and ZANU-PF were present, while 63% of agents present were from the MDC alliance. In all circumstances, none of the observers reported party agents requesting for recounts of ballots. And so on the other issues that are going to come, I'll just give you a little summary here before my colleague, Mr. Makoni, comes in to take it further there. So there's been a table on distribution of presence of agents representing the top three parties. The top three parties, CCC, ZANU-PF, MDC Alliance. This is not necessarily the order of their big top, you know. CCC had 99% coverage. ZANU-PF had 100% coverage. Then MDC Alliance had 62% coverage. Then the results that were posted, 97% polling stations posted the results from V11 outside. Sorry, let me take that again. 97% polling stations posted the results from V11 outside for the public to see. While party agents were given copies of the same in almost all the reported polling stations, 6 cases of not providing agents with V11 forms was reported in Mashonaland East, and 4 were reported in Harare. On the question of this issue of community cohesion, ERC and ZESN observed recorded high turnout as well as high vote share for a single party at multiple rural polling stations across Murewa South and Mtasa South when compared to their respective constituency turnout and vote shares. These are indications of, these are indicators of community cohesion. For Murewa South, the average turnout was approximately 49%, but for those polling stations, turnout was 60% and above. Similarly, from Mtasa South, the average turnout was approximately 35%, but for these polling stations, turnout was over 50%. For both constituencies, the vote share for ZANU-PF was over 90%, much higher than for other polling stations. This pattern calls into question where voters were able to freely participate. I want to take that again. This pattern calls into questions whether voters were able to freely participate in the process and if the results truly reflect their preferences. There's another table here on which reflects the high turnout and ZANU-PF vote share than average in Murewa South and in Mtasa South. I will not bore you with the figures as well as the percentages here. I will defer to my colleague, Mr. Andrew, to take, Mr. Andrew going to take over from there.
Thank you, Trust. So I will take you through our symbol-based observation, as my colleague alluded to. The symbol-based observation is an advanced election day observation methodology which allows ERC and ZESN to confidently comment on the voting and results tabulation process for all polling stations in the selected constituencies, including those that did not have observers, including an independent verification of the results announced by ZEC itself. ERC and ZESN selected 6 priority constituencies to deploy the SBO methodology for the by-election, which included Binga North, which is in Matabeleland North Province, Chivi South in Masvingo Province, Epworth, Harare Metropolitan, Kwekwe Central, which is in Midlands Province, Murewa South, which is in Mashonaland Province, and Mtasa South, which is in Manicaland. These 6 constituencies were selected to provide geographic spread and to reflect the political diversity of the country. So I'll start with Binga North. Our SBO observers were deployed to 25% of the polling stations in the Binga North constituency. And we do have a comparison of the results that have been posted so far by ZEC with our SBO estimates. You know, how it works is that we'll then be able to see whether the results as announced by ZEC fall within our estimates. So, for instance, if we take Binga North, as I indicated, candidate by candidate, the MDCA candidate the result which is announced by ZEC is that they scored 356, which is 1.9% of the total overall result. And when we then look at our estimates, we estimated that MDC Alliance would score about 1.2% of the estimated vote. That is the lower limit, and the upper limit was 2.6%. So the ZEC result then falls within the estimate of our SBO. Then when we then go to the independent Bukuli discipline, he had 220 votes, and that constituted 1.2% of the overall vote in the constituency. Our lower estimate, SBO estimate, was 0.8%, and our upper limit for this candidate was 1.6%. So the 1.2% falls within our estimate. Then ZANU-PF candidate Munsaka Kudakwashe, ZEC says he received 7,971 votes, and that is 42.4% of the overall voter count in the constituency. In terms of our estimates, before we deployed our methodology, we estimated that the lower score would be 36.4% for the ZANU-PF candidate, and the upper limit was going to be 46.8%. So the 42.4% falls within our lower and upper limits. And when we come to UDA, the UDA candidate Clive Muzamba scored 136 votes, and that was 0.7% of the overall result. We had estimated that he would get between 0.4% and 1%. So the 0.7% falls within the SBO estimates. Sibanda Dubeko Prince of the CCC scored 10,120 votes, and that constituted 53.8% of the vote in the constituency. Our estimate was that the CCC candidate was going to get a lower score of 49.4% of the vote, and we'd estimated a maximum of 59.8%. So what ZEC has announced again fall within the SBO estimate. As for Epworth, our sample-based observers were deployed to 50% of the polling stations. And the comparison again, I must say that when we look at the candidates who participated, again fall within that estimate. I will not bore you with those who scored less. Perhaps I would concentrate on the two key candidates here. When we then share with you, our statement, you then begin to see the estimate. So Etheridge Guerrero of the CCC, Triple C, got 8,283 votes, and that was 41.8% of the overall voting in the constituency. In our SBO estimate, we had estimated that the CCC would get 38.9%, the lower limit, and the maximum of 45.5%. And therefore, the result announced by ZEC, which is 41.8%, fall within that estimate. And for the ZANU-PF candidate, Makari Zalera Azinei, she scored 10,248, which is 51.7% of the vote. Our estimates were between 47% and 54%. and therefore the result, which was again announced by ZEC, falls within that particular SBO estimates. Then Murewa South constituency, again focusing on the main two contenders there. The ZANU-PF candidates scored 11,125 votes, and that constituted 83% of the ballot. We had estimated that the top figure, I do not have the lower limit there, but the top, the highest estimate there would be 83.9%. The candidate scored 83%, and therefore that score is within range. But I think with the rider, because we've heard my colleague speaking to some voting pattern, which we will be further investigating. Then the CCC candidate scored 1,720 votes, which constituted 13% of the vote. We had actually estimated again 13% of the vote, and as a result, that estimate actually is on point with what the CCC candidate received. Since the SBO deployed to 100% in this particular constituency of the polling stations that there, that explains why there are no lower and upper limits. So we just said that bit as I indicated. Mutasa South, for Mutasa South, it is not possible to verify the result from Mutasa South. Our SBO observers reported high turnout and vote share for a number of polling stations. While the average turnout from Mutasa was approximately 35%, all of those polling stations we are talking about had a turnout of over 50%. At the same time, over 90% of votes were cast for one candidate in those polling stations, and that candidate was a ZANU-PF candidate, while for the constituents as a whole, ZANU-PF received only slightly over 50% of the votes. These are indicators of community cohesion and that voters were not able to freely participate in the election. Given that the official margin of victory was only 549 votes, this community cohesion undermines the credibility of the Mutasa South election and the legitimacy of the outcome. And I will perhaps demonstrate the comparison of a high turnout and political parties' vote share in Mutasa South. And so at Premier Primary School A, the turnout was 59%. And for ZANU-PF, they got 96% of that turnout. CCC got 3%. The MDCA got 0%. And an independent got 1%. At Chida Zembe Primary School, turnout was at 58% overall. ZANU-PF got 95%, CCC got 7%, MDCA 1%, and the independent candidates 0%. At Howling Farm Tent A, the turnout was 51%. ZANU-PF got the highest share there of 91%. The CCC got 7%. MDCA got 1%. And independent 0%. At Fairview, Farm Tent A, the turnout was 48%. ZANU-PF got 98% of that vote. CCC 2%, MDSC A 0%, and the independent candidate 0%. Murewa constituency turnout was at 35%. ZANU-PF 52%. CCC 47%, and then 2% of MDCA and 0% for the independents. This is our preliminary statement that we wanted to share with you. As we indicated, we are still, working on some of the materials that we are receiving. We still have at least 2 of the centers where we were having the SBO, methodology deployed. The results are still to come. That is Kwekwe Central, one of them. The other one is Chivi South. So those results have not been confirmed yet, and as a result, we cannot complete our exercise. But once we are able to confirm those results officially from ZEC, we will then be able to give our overall SBO report. We end here, colleagues. Thank you very much for listening. Over to you, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Makoni, and thank you, Mr. Manda. At this juncture, we'll be entertaining questions from the media. We'll take the questions. Yes, Lovejoy, your hand is up. So before you speak, we'll entertain the first 4 questions, and then we give Mr. Manda and Mr. Makoni the chance to explain, and then after that we'll take another set of 4 questions. So we'll start with you, Lovejoy.
Okay, I'm Lovejoy from 26 Research. Sorry, I just need clarity on the Mutasa issue. I didn't get that. You mentioned something along the lines of voter manipulation or something. So may you kindly explain on that? I think it's a very important issue.
Okay. Next question. If there are no quick reactions to that, I think we'll give Mr. Makoni and Mr. Manda the chance to explain the issue on the Mutasa South constituency.
Thank you, Lovejoy, for that very important question. So how we're going to proceed, we do have technical colleagues here, Solomon and Ian, who are sitting behind you. They will be able to answer some of the questions, particularly giving detail to some of the things we may not have. As we indicated, these things are developing story, so we'll continue to engage on it. But just to give a snippet of what was happening in the particular polling stations where there was this very, very high turnout compared to other polling stations in the same constituency. We are getting reports that there were people who were being bussed into certain centers. We're also getting reports that there were particular traditional leaders in the constituency where these leaders, the voters who first visit the homestead of these leaders and are then escorted by an agent kind of to the polling stations. These are reports that we are receiving, and when we then look at the turnout at those polling stations compared to the average in the whole constituency, we then would want to interpret that further to say what is the effect, what is the impact of that sudden surge in those polling stations where there was this suspicion of voters being bussed in, or coming in their numbers, being entertained at maybe the headman or whoever's placed before they go and cast their ballot.
Sorry, do you have specific names for those polling stations? Are you able to disclose?
Yes, we do have the names. I've already, given those names when I was, yes, the last page, okay. So I mentioned Premier Primary School A. I also mentioned Chida Zembe Primary A, then Holding Farm 10A, Fairview Farm 10A. Those are the four polling stations where that has been reported. As I indicated, I don't know whether Ian and Solo, you have something to add there? Particularly explaining the vote share kind of, it's too technical for some of us.
Thank you very much for the question. I think when we look at the vote share for the candidates, we are looking at the proportion of the votes that are being casted for the other candidates as compared to the winning political party in the context of these forced marched citizens to go to the polling stations. So when you look at those polling stations that Mr. Makone referred to, particularly in Mtasa South and Murewa South constituencies, those are in the farming communities. And from the context, we would know that these are populations that are staying in restricted spaces, and they know each other, and they are likely to comply with any instruction that is given by the owners or those that are in control in those particular areas. So if you look at the list, you realize that most of those are also farming communities, and they are in farm tents, and then in rare opportunities again, we find the same in Mutasa Rural as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Makoni. I see a hand up. Yes, you can go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Thomas. I want to ask you the methodology that you used to come up with your lower and upper estimates. How do you arrive at such numbers?
Ian?
So let me, to answer that, so to answer that, let me start by explaining what a sample-based observation methodology is. So what we do is that we are able to project the results of a certain election. So we are able to project the results of an election without necessarily deploying 100%. Because if you deploy 100%, you're not necessarily doing statistical projection, but just computing results from every polling station. So this methodology that we utilize is a statistical and scientific methodology which can be replicated in any setting. So what we do is that we start off by sampling, creating a sample of polling stations. So that means if a constituency has 42, we do not necessarily need to go to the 42, but we actually then determine how many we want to cover. So you just need to cover a certain percentage of that 42, and then you make sure that the sample that you draw upon is random. That's very important. You cannot have preferences of which polling stations to cover. So it has to be random. So in statistical terms, you know what that means. It means there's a formulation that you need to, a formula that you need to put in Excel that allows you to pick specific polling stations randomly, and that is automatically generated. So once you do that, you then deploy observers to that specific sample. So observers are not then picking and choosing whichever polling station they want to go to. They're assigned to a specific one. So when the results come through now, when you are using this sample-based methodology, you are able then to project what else is happening in terms of trends. So whatever comes through that statistical representative sample, you are able now to be able to project. So you don't need to be everywhere. Everything that's happening in there, you can be able to project with absolute certainty what you find happening. So we're able to speak with authority about voting processes, for instance, how well they are going, just by looking at exactly what happened in those polling stations which are picked by that sample. So that's a methodology that has been tried and tested across Africa, and in every country where it has been deployed, it has never been rolled back, because it is a scientific methodology which can be replicated. So that's what has been happening with the sample-based methodology, and that's what we have been employing for observational of these specific polling stations, National Assembly by-elections that we have been speaking to in this press conference. Thank you. Upper and lower. So upper and lower is essentially, if you're doing projections, you have to first of all come up with your projections are essentially speaking to a trend. So you have to be able to say, if the process that I'm doing projections for, what is the set limit that, if we're talking about election results, for instance, and we start off by knowing the total number of registered voters in a place, because that tells you the ceiling that you can hit, or if everyone comes through to cast their vote. So you are able to tell that within the different electoral contestants that are vying for whatever seat that's being contested in that election, you're able then to say if they then get votes from the people that cast their votes, they are able to get certain number of votes. So when you go to the results that are coming through, remember we are dealing with a sample. That sample, we are able then to say these trends, they speak to candidate A getting not more than, if we are measuring out of 10, not more than 7 and not less than 5. So that's the upper and lower limit, how it's calculated, based on the trends that are coming from the sample that we've picked. So we are able to distribute all those projections to the different electoral contestants. If there are 4 in an election, we're able to then project with certainty the upper and lower limit for each and every one of those 4. And then when we are saying that we've verified the result, we're essentially telling you that after we've done those computations, if we've come up with projections for each and every one of the candidates, we are expecting an official result to fall within certain margins. So the upper limit means is going to be 7, lower limit is going to be 5. If a result goes outside that, then we begin to question. Because the statistical projection has put margins, they've put defined parameters within which a result must fall within. So that's how the sample-based methodology helps us then provide or verify, rather, that's the word, verify whether an election result is credible. If it falls within a margin, then it's credible. If it falls outside the margin, it means we are not able to verify whether that result is a true reflection of the will of those that have contested, that have cast their vote within that election. So I hope that helps you understand the lower and upper limit for any projections. All right. So when also we are doing these projections, we also are working with what we call a margin of error. So we try to fix it within around 2%. So it means every time that we are coming up with our projections, that 2% then defines for you where that 7 and that 5 lies. So if we, for instance, we are working with a small projection, it means our margin of error, a small sample, it means our margin of error has to be smaller. And if we're working with a bigger sample, then our margin of error, we can allow it for it to be higher, because then we are saying we have a bigger sample to work with. So basically, that's how we then come up with that lower and upper. There's a relationship between the margin of error that we allow to incorporate into our calculation. So all that, when you put it together, is just giving you a set threshold to say this is the ceiling that the projection can start from, and that is the lower limit that a projection can go down to. And so it gives us just something that helps us predict something, if we may use those that kind of an analogy. Thank you.
Thank you.